Welcome to the week 6 tutorial question number 3. So here we are going to perform one sample t-test for mean distance, so CBD. So the question is asking you to determine the average distance of house from CBD is greater than 12 kilometers. So using the data set, we need to perform a one sample t-test to check whether this claim is valid or not. So for this one, we are going to use the hypothesis framework that includes 4 steps. So with that, moving on to our data set. This is our housing data set. Our interested variable is CBD2 distance. So I'll copy this variable and then I paste it into this new sheet. And then I rename this new sheet as a question number 3. Now we need to perform the hypothesis testing. So the first one, I need to state the null and alternative hypothesis. So the step 1 is null hypothesis and the alternative hypothesis. If you look at the question, you can easily find out the alternative hypothesis. The city planners claim that the average distance to the houses from CBD is greater than 12 kilometers. So I'm going to use the average distance as a mu, which is greater than 12,000. Since the data is in meter, so I'm going to use the mean test or the hypothesis test in the same unit. So instead of using 12 kilometer, I use the 12,000 meter. So the null hypothesis mu is less than or equal 12,000. So remember that when we need to specify the hypothesis, it is always better to start from the specifying alternative hypothesis. And then while writing the null hypothesis, we need to include the equal sign as well. So therefore, less than or equal, which included in the null hypothesis. The step 2 is we need to state our decision rule. So the decision rule is the same for all the hypothesis testing, that if the p-value is less than the 5%, the 5% is the level of significance. So we are going to reject the null hypothesis in favor of the alternative hypothesis. So that is the step 2. Step 3, we are going to do the analysis. In the question, it's already mentioned, we need to perform one sample t-test. Again, by looking at the data set, we also confirm this is one sample t-test because we are going to deal with one sample parameter, that is CBD to the house distance, right? So this is our interested variable. But when we go to the data analysis tool pack, we have the test which is related to 2 samples. Therefore, I'm going to create another variable which is called dummy with the observation values with 0. So now I can choose the 2 sample test, 2 sample t-test, assuming unequal variance, because I know that we are going to get unequal variance since the column B variable are having only the value 0. So if I click OK, this is asking the input range. So the variable 1 range is this one. The variable 2 range is this one. Hypothesis mean difference is we are going to test the hypothesis 12,000. And the alpha level is 0.05. I have selected the column heading while I select the variable name. So I tick this column, the box, and then I need to get the output range here. So if I click OK, I'm getting this output range. Now we are going to compare the p-value with the alpha level for making our conclusion. So this is our step 4. In this step, we are going to use this one tail or two tail p-test, p-value we need to decide. Before that, we also need to check the assumption, the validity. So similar to the question number 2, here also we are having the sample size which is greater than the 30. So bigger data set. So we are having normal distribution. Probably we will have the normal distribution. So we can use the t test. And then for confirming this p-value, are we going to use the p-value with the one-tail test, or are we going to use the p-value with the two-tail test? So this decision depends on the specification of the alternative hypothesis. Here we are using the alternative hypothesis with the greater than sign. So we are going to use the one-tail test, right? But if we look at the one-tail test, there are two types of one-tail test. One is upper one-tail test and the lower one-tail test. So, but the analytical toolpack is giving only one-tail test. But depending on the magnitude of this variable, whether you are getting positive value or the negative value, you can decide whether it is upper value or lower value. If you are getting p-value with positive value, that is upper value. If you are getting negative value, that is lower tail p-value. So in this case, we are having upper tail p-value since we are having the positive value. So now we are going to use the one-tail test because our alternative specification, hypothesis specification has the greater than sign. So we are using one-tail test with that p-value. P-value is less equal to 0, so which is less than the, which is less than the 0.05 level of significance. Therefore, we are rejecting null hypothesis in favor of alternative hypothesis. Here, the alternative hypothesis greater than 12,000, right? So we are rejecting the null hypothesis less than or equal 12,000. We are favoring the alternative hypothesis that is greater than 12,000. So we can write the conclusion in our own language that p-value, that because p-value is less than the 5%, we therefore reject the null hypothesis in favor of the alternative hypothesis. Therefore, we have evidence to suggest that the average distance to CBD is greater than the 12 kilometer. Similar to the data analytic toolpack, you can also use the template, right? So the same thing here also, we don't know the population parameter. You are going to use the copy and then you are going to paste it here. So the sample size, for getting this sample size, mean and the standard deviation, we also need to perform the descriptive statistic. Again, you need to do the data, descriptive statistics, and then input range, and the output My output will be here, and the summary statistics. So the sample size equal this one, and the sample mean equal this one, and the sample standard deviation equal this one, and the hypothesis value is 12,000, and the level of significance is 0.05. If you get enter, then you have the one tail test. If you look at here, we have lower one tail test, upper one tail test, and the two tail test. But based on our alternative hypothesis, we are going to choose one tail test. The question is, are we going to use the lower one tail test or the upper one tail test? So in our case, the alternative hypothesis is greater than, null hypothesis is less than or equal. So if you look at here, null hypothesis is less than or equal. So this is upper one tail test. So our p-value is 0. We are rejecting the null hypothesis. We got the same conclusion here. So based on this one, we are having the conclusion that we have enough evidence to reject the null hypothesis in favor of alternative hypothesis. So that's all about the question number 3.